everybody, welcome back to Cammie's Reading with Kids. Today we're continuing where we left off with Little Leaders, Bold Women in Black History by Vashti Harrison. Zora Neale Hurston, 1891 to 1960, writer, folklorist, anthropologist. Zora's unique upbringing led her down a path of storytelling and creativity. She was born and raised in Eatonville, a historic town in northern Florida. Eatonville was special because in 1886 it became the first self-governed all-black city in America. It was an idyllic, nurturing environment that fostered an extreme sense of pride in its culture and traditions. As a young woman, Zora worked a number of jobs and saved up enough money to enroll at Howard University in 1918. There she published her first story. By 1925, Zora had won awards for writing and had caught the attention of prominent black authors living in Harlem. That year, she moved to New York and continued her undergraduate degree as the first black student at the all-women's Barnard College. She worked alongside famous creatives including Langston Hughes, Countee Cullen, and Alan Locke, who were involved in black artistic movement known as the Harlem Renaissance. They were called the New Negroes. Zora was celebrated as a writer who personified the movement and was given the nickname Queen of the Renaissance. Zora recognized the need to record African American stories, and she celebrated them long before others realized how important they would be. Her famous works include her masterpiece, Their Eyes Were Watching God, a novel inspired by her Eatonville past. In Mules and Men, her published collection of stories from northern Florida, she tracked and recorded the tales that built up the rich culture of the African American South. Tell My Horse was the result of years of research and study of folklore and religion in Jamaica and Haiti. Upon her passing, the famous writer Alice Walker called her a genius of the South. Alma Woodsey Thomas, 1891 to 1978, teacher and painter. Born in Columbus, Georgia, Alma grew in a home surrounded by lush landscapes and beautiful plants. In her youth, Alma showed promise in architecture, but was truly in love with art. She said that when she walked into her first art classroom in high school, it felt like entering heaven. She enjoyed working with children and pursued a career in teaching kindergarten. She taught arts and crafts for several years before attending Howard University. She was the first student in Howard's brand new art department, whose founder encouraged her to paint full-time. Upon graduation, though, she returned to her first love, education. She devoted her life to children, teaching at Shaw Junior High School for 35 years. She continued painting and pursued her master's degree in art education at Columbia University in New York City during her summers off. She is most often associated with the group of artists belonging to the color field movement, painters who work only with large shapes or fields of color to express themselves. When she retired from teaching in 1960, Alma concentrated on painting full-time. She had a big art show at Howard University for which she created something totally different from anything she had done before. Inspired by nature, she created paintings with tiny bright rectangles and repeating shapes. It became her signature style. In 1972, when she was 80 years old, Alma's paintings were exhibited at the Whitney Museum of American Art. This was the first ever solo exhibition of an African American woman artist at one of America's most important art museums. Alma is truly a testament to being dedicated to the thing you love and having the patience to let it grow. Alice Ball, 1892 to 1916, chemist and medical researcher. Both Alice's mother and grandfather were photographers, and as a child she developed an interest in the chemicals used in photography. She went to college in her hometown of Seattle and earned not one but 2 degrees in pharmaceutical chemistry and pharmacy. What an accomplishment for a young woman! At the time, most of the African American population in the city was employed in service professions, cleaning homes or making food, for example. But Alice defied expectations and her circumstances by seeking an education and a career in science. In 1915, Alice became the first woman and first African American to graduate with a master's degree from the University of Hawaii. While working on her thesis, she developed what would become the leading treatment for leprosy, a serious and incurable disease. She found a way for oil from the seed of the kalmugra tree to be absorbed in the bloodstream. This treatment became the primary method that would be used until the 1940s, but for a long time no one knew Alice was the inventor. Less than 2 years after this discovery, Alice died, and the director of her program took credit for her findings. Alice's method became known as the Dean method. It wasn't until the 1970s that historians unearthed the truth and worked to ensure that Alice got credit for her important discovery. On February 29, 2000, the University of Hawaii recognized her for her work and dedicated a plaque to her on the only kalmugra tree on the school's campus. That day, the Lieutenant Governor of Hawaii declared February 29th Alice Ball Day. Bessie Coleman, 1892 to 1926. Pilot. Bessie grew up in a small segregated town in Texas. At home with 3 younger siblings around, she had lots of responsibilities: washing clothes by hand, fetching clean water, on top of walking 4 miles to school and back every day. Bessie knew that one day she would leave her small town. In 1915, she moved to Chicago to live with her older brothers. Returning from World War I, they told her all about being in France and about how the women there could fly planes, unlike the women in America. This got Bessie curious, furiously curious. She applied to every aviation school in America she could find, but was denied entry. No one at any of these schools thought a girl could fly, especially not a black girl. Bessie wanted to prove them wrong. In 1920, she moved to France, where she could finally learn aviation. She was so gifted, she graduated from the 10-month flight school in only 7 months. So in 1921, Bessie became the first African American woman in the world to receive her pilot's license. She specialized in stunt flying, parachuting, and aerial tricks. After returning home to the United States, Bessie flew for huge crowds. She was very popular among both white and black Americans and stood up against segregation and discrimination whenever she could. She hoped to open up her own flight school to teach other girls of color how to fly. Unfortunately, during a show in 1926, a mechanical issue caused her plane to crash. Bessie passed away, but her legacy lives on. In 1977, the Bessie Coleman Aviators Club opened in Chicago to support women of all races to reach their dreams of flying. Augusta Sauvage, 1892 to 1962, educator and sculptor. Augusta grew up in a poor family with 13 brothers and sisters in Green Cove Springs, Florida. As a child, she had no toys to play with, but she loved to make things. Augusta spent time in her backyard where the soil was rich with natural red clay. This was where she learned to make miniature animals for herself and others. However, her father did not approve of her creativity. Even though it meant angering him, Augusta continued to sculpt. In 1921, she moved to Harlem, a prominent African American neighborhood in New York City. At the time, the community was experiencing an exciting boom in the arts known as the Harlem Renaissance, and Augusta was a part of it. She thrived artistically, but this did not change the hardships of racism that were still prevalent in the United States and all around the world. Augusta openly fought racial prejudice in the art world and was labeled a troublemaker. She said that she was standing up not only for herself, but for future students of color. Augusta dedicated much of her life to teaching and encouraging young people to pursue their artistic passion. She felt that their creations could be part of her legacy. In Harlem, she opened her own school, the Sauvage School of Arts and Crafts. and she became the first director of the Harlem Community Art Center. In 1939, she created her most iconic work, a large piece commissioned by the New York World Fair titled Lift Every Voice and Sing, also known as The Harp. Despite her artistic success, Augusta struggled with finances and racism until late in life, but she always found a way to keep making art. Marian Anderson, 1897 to 1993, opera singer. With a nickname like Baby Conalto, Marian always had a future in opera. She started singing with the church choir in her hometown of Philadelphia when she was only 6 years old. The congregation wanted to help cultivate Marian's natural talent, so they raised funds to get her voice lessons. By the 1930s, Marian was performing at big venues and famous institutions in the United States and Europe, often as the first woman or African American to do so. In 1935, she was invited to the White House to sing for President and First Lady Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt. She was the first African American to receive such an honor. This, however, did not stop discrimination from affecting her career. In 1939, she was barred from performing at Constituent Hall in Washington, D.C. When Eleanor Roosevelt found out, she invited Marian to sing at the Lincoln Memorial on Easter Sunday. Marian sang in front of a crowd of 75,000 people and was broadcast live across the United States to millions by radio. Marian stayed in the national spotlight for many more years. In 1955, she became the first African American to perform with the New York Metropolitan Opera. She delivered the national anthem at President John F. Kennedy's inauguration. He later awarded her the Presidential Medal of Freedom. She participated in the Civil Rights Movement and sang at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in 1963. Marian was a trailblazer and a leader in her field, with a long respected career. With her voice, she reached people all around the world, and when faced with adversity, she rose above it. Josephine Baker, 1906 to 1975, singer and dancer. Josephine had an early start in the entertainment business. As a child in St. Louis, Missouri, she would put on song and dance shows with the neighborhood kids. By the time she was 14, she was working as a stagehand at local theaters. The first time she performed on stage, she made waves with her wild dancing and silliness. She stood out from the chorus line, and the other performers sourly called her a scene stealer. But that was just Josephine's style. Josephine's career really took off when she went to Europe. France became her adoptive country, and Paris her stage. When she returned to the United States, American audiences were not very receptive to her, a black woman who seemed too uppity for her own skin. Josephine, meanwhile, was shocked by the prejudice and discrimination she encountered. From then on, she negotiated non-discrimination clauses in her contracts for her performances and fought for integrated audiences. Her fearlessness did not end there. During World War II, Josephine worked for the French resistance, smuggling secret messages in her sheet music and undergarments. After the war, she was awarded two of France's highest military honors. Josephine built a large, loving family with adoptive kids from all over the world. She called them the Rainbow Tribe. In 1963, she traveled back to the United States to march with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at the famous March on Washington. She was the only woman slated to speak that day. Josephine was never one to fall in line. She always stood out and made her own way. She was a brave woman who was so much more than just a performer. Mahalia Jackson, 1911 to 1972, gospel singer. Born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana, Mahala was always surrounded by the sounds of the blues and Mardi Gras. As a child, she sang jazz songs by Bessie Smith in her room at night. But little Hallie, as she was called, came from a religious family, and the only music that was acceptable to them was gospel music. She made her singing debut in the choir at the Mount Moriah Baptist Church and blew everyone away with her enormous voice. Later in life, she felt the urge to sing non-religious music, but she had made a promise to herself and her family to only sing gospel, and she stuck to it her whole life. She turned down big nightclub shows and lived on very little money, but in 1946, she recorded a single, Move On Up a Little Higher, that sold over 2 million copies. She gained a following around the United States and traveled for performances. Her shows drew large crowds from both the black and white communities. Segregation, however, was still the law of the land, and Mahalia struggled with it during and after her performances. When she was on the road, Mahalia kept food in her car just so she wouldn't be relegated to the colored section of a restaurant. At the request of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Mahalia participated in the Montgomery bus boycott, and in 1963 she performed at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, where Reverend King gave his famous I Have a Dream speech. She was on the podium behind him, and when he started to go off script, she encouraged him. "Tell him, Martin," she shouted. "Tell him about the dream." The most famous part of his speech wasn't planned, but Mahalia knew how powerful his words were and how important it would be to share them. Rosa Parks, 1913 to 2005, activist and writer. Growing up in Montgomery, Alabama, Rosa detested the rules of segregation, having to drink from different water fountains or being barred from whites-only restaurant. In the South, rules for riding the bus were particularly harsh. A black person had to enter through the front door, pay the fare, exit the bus, and then re-enter through a rear door. Each bus had 3 sections, a whites-only section in the front, a back section in the back, and an overflow section in the middle. If the middle was empty, a black person could sit there. But if one white person wanted to sit in the middle, every black person would have to get up and stand in the back of the bus. In December 1955, after going a long shift at work, Rosa waited for a bus with empty seats and finally got one with a seat in the overflow section. But before long, the white section became full, and Rosa and others were asked to move. Enough was enough for Rosa. She refused to relinquish her seat. The bus driver filed charges. Rosa was arrested and jailed. She used her one phone call to contact her friends at the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NACAP. Rosa was not the first person to fight these laws, and it wasn't even her first time. She had been arrested previously for defying the rules. But her protest ignited a reaction that caught the attention of the whole country. Martin Luther King Jr. called for a boycott of all public transportation in Montgomery. The Montgomery bus boycott was a key event for the civil rights movement and set off a chain reaction of protests across the United States. The boycott was ultimately successful. In 1956, the bus system was integrated, but there was still a long way to go in the fight for civil rights, so Rosa continued to work with NACAP and the Black Power movement throughout her life. And I'll be continuing that next week. Make-up Mess by Robert Munsch. Julie had saved up lots of money. She had saved up her birthday money, her Christmas money, and her paper route money, and she had robbed her little brother's piggy bank. Altogether, she had $100. Julie walked out the door holding all that money, and her mother said, "Julie, where are you going?" Said Julie, "I'm going to buy myself some makeup." Julie's mother yelled, "Oh no!" Julie didn't pay any attention. She ran to the drugstore, put the money down, and said, "I want some red lipstick, blue lipstick, black lipstick, pink lipstick, yellow lipstick, purple lipstick. I want one of everything you got." The man gave Julie an enormous box of makeup. She picked it up, carried it home, and took it into the bathroom. Then she said, "Now I'm going to make myself beautiful." So Julie took some purple stuff and stuck it on her eyes. She took some green stuff and put it on her cheeks. She took some black stuff and put it on her lips, and she colored her hair purple. Then she put 19 earrings in one ear and 17 earrings in the other ear. Julie looked in the mirror and said, "Wow, I am as pretty as a movie star." Julie ran downstairs and went into the kitchen. Her mother looked at her and yelled, "Ah!" Julie said, "What's the matter with my mother? She's acting very strange today." Then Julie walked into the living room and her father looked up and yelled, "Ah!" Julie said, "What's the matter with my father? He's acting very strange today." Julie ran back upstairs, washed off all the makeup, and started over. This time she took some yellow stuff and stuck it on her eyes. She took some purple stuff and put it on her cheeks. She took some green stuff and put it on her lips, and she colored her hair red. Then she put 19 earrings in one ear, 17 earrings in the other ear, and 2 rings in her nose. Julie looked in the mirror and said, "Wow, I am as pretty as 2 movie stars." She walked downstairs and went into the living room. Her mother saw her and didn't say anything. She just fell right over. Then Julie walked into the kitchen. Her father saw her and didn't say anything. He just fell right over. Then someone knocked at the door. Blam, 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 blam. Julie opened the door. It was the mailman. He didn't say anything either. He just fell right over. "Oh dear," said Julie. "I must have made a terrible mistake with my makeup." So Julie ran upstairs and washed everything off. Then she looked in the mirror and said, "Oh no, I have spent $100 and all I have left is my regular face. This is terrible. Nobody will think that I'm pretty." Julie walked downstairs. Her mother got up off the floor, and her father got up off the floor, and the mailman got up off the floor, and they all said, "Now you're really learning how to use makeup. Now you're really beautiful." Julie said, but, I don't have on any makeup at all." Then she ran back up the stairs, looked in the mirror, and yelled, "Look at me. I'm beautiful with no makeup." Then Julie leaned out the window and yelled, "Who wants to buy some makeup?" All the girls in the neighborhood came running and asked, "How much?" $300, said Julie. So all the girls ran and got their birthday money and their New Year's money and their tooth fairy money, and they gave Julie the $300. Then they ran into Julie's bathroom and yelled, "Now I'm going to make myself beautiful." And Julie used some of the money to pay back her little brother, and she took the rest to the thrift store to buy lots of old clothes for dress up. The end. The Berenstain Bears Blaze a Trail by Stan and Jan Berenstain. "This way, Scouts," Brother Bear said. "Let's go while Papa is still in bed. Let's blaze a trail through the woods by ourselves, the way Scouts should." But Papa Bear was not still in bed. He was waiting for them up ahead. "This way, Scouts, let's blaze that trail. With me along, you cannot fail." "Wait," said Brother, for Scout Leader Jane. "Look, here she comes now in her plane. She's going to watch us from the air." She wasn't too pleased to see Papa Bear. "What What you scouts need is a guide like me. I'll get you those badges. Come, you'll see. This way, scouts, the way is wrong. That twisty way will take too long. But Papa, the guidebook says, when blazing a trail through swamp or bog, never step on a sunken log. And that log, said Sister, is a crocodile. Papa blazed that trail Papa Bear style. Wow, said Fred, this is good, a whole new trail right through the wood. That, bragged Papa, is a good lesson for you. Just get up speed and crash right through. Now mark the trail, Sister read from the book, so others will follow the path you took. Pooh, said Papa, twig signs are not for me. Watch this. Here, watch this. I use a tree. Then he went flying through the air into a nest, an eagle's nest. Just thought I'd drop in, said Papa Bear. The scouts marched on through the wood, and soon the trail was not so good. This won't last, said Papa Bear. While I was up that tree back there, I could see for miles around. Come, this is the way to higher ground. The ground is good, it's higher and drier, just the place for our cooking fire. But Pop, said Brother, we don't need to cook. We have our trail rations, lots of them, look. Trail rations? Poof! I'll cook up a batch of my delicious trailblazer stew. When on the trail, wild things are best, all cooked up in an old bird nest. Now for the taste of my delicious trailblazer stew. Pew! He spit something out. On second thought, stew's not my diet. That trail food, I think I'll try it. Come, shouted Papa, your merit badges are almost won through Rocky Gorge, and the test is done. Shh, Papa, shh. It says in the guide, in rocky places do not shout, the noise can cause rocks to slide. But Sister's warning came too late. Can't hear, shouted Papa. The noise of these rocks is much too great. Then Jane, who was watching all the while, landed her plane on Papa's rock pile. Your merit badges, the scout leader said, for brother, for sister, and for cousin Fred. And one badge more, added leader Jane. One for Papa, I shall explain. Papa, you blazed a trail, you did it fast. Your 3 landmarks are sure to last. First we have Crocodile Alley, thanks to you. Second, the smell you made by your stew. The third landmark I have in mind is the great rock pile you left behind. We did it, Scouts, we knew we could. We did what we said we would. We won the badges to wear with pride by following our Bear Scout guide. The end. Raccoons and Ripe Corn by Jim Arnosky. It is autumn. Leaves from trees near the edge of a farm sail over the cornfield. The silk at the top of the ears of corn is turning brown. The corn is plump and ripe. At night, a mother raccoon and her almost grown kits sneak into the cornfield. The raccoons walk between the rows of corn. They climb the tall stalks and pull the ears down to the ground. They peel away the green husks that cover the yellow kernels. All night the raccoons feast on corn. They pull down more corn than they can eat. At sunrise, the raccoons hurry back into the woods. Wind whistling through the trees sends autumn leaves sailing out over the field of ripe corn. The end. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for tuning into Cammie's Kids Reading. Have a great day.